Okay. All right. So without further ado on the particulars, that's our schedule. And we're going to lead it off with Leah Kelleher of MassDEP's Municipal Waste Reduction Branch. And she's going to discuss the goings on with our Reduce and Reuse subcommittee that has been meeting regularly here. So I'm just going to bring up the PowerPoint, that going, and we'll be off and running with today's meeting. Of course, I just hit record. So me messing around with the tech is the thing that everybody is seeing. Great. Okay. Everybody's seeing the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Yes.
hand it off to Leah.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. As Sean mentioned, my name is Leah Kelleher. I'm with MassDEP's Municipal Waste Reduction Branch. I may be a new face to some of you, so hello. This is who I am if you've been emailing me. And I work on reuse initiatives, including our work of our Reduce and Reuse working group, which I'll be providing some updates on and also teasing some things to come as we look ahead. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start with a high-level refresher. MassDEP established the Reduce and Reuse Working Group as part of our 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan. And that working group is made up of a bunch of different stakeholders, all working on reuse and in the reuse space in Massachusetts. Everything from businesses to nonprofits to municipalities, you name it. And at the end of 2021, we released Massachusetts' first Reduce and Reuse Action Plan as we start to direct more attention to reducing upstream waste and thinking about things like repair and reuse, of course. And then through numerous stakeholder meetings, we identified several priority materials for reuse, which are laid out in our action plan. And next slide, please. Here they are. So I wanted to provide a snapshot of what those materials are, but the ones that I'll be focusing on in the next couple of updates and that we've spent the most time on so far are single-use packaging, building materials, and textiles and clothing. But I just wanted to note that there are other streams here that we'll be turning our attention to as we wrap up some of our other projects. Next slide. So first is building materials. Within our Reduce and Reuse working group, that larger, broader group, we have a subgroup, our deconstruction work group, that focuses on this material stream. So thinking about how do we reuse building materials and also start to transition away from demolition and toward deconstruction, that careful dismantling of buildings so that materials can be reused and recycled instead of ending up in the trash. And like our broader Reduce and Reuse working group, the deconstruction work group is made up of a bunch of different stakeholders working in this space. Folks include building officials, contractors, municipalities, folks from planning departments, you name it. And we aim to meet quarterly. And so far, we've done some deep dives into a whole variety of topics and resources related to building material reuse and deconstruction. These meetings, which you can see on the slide, this is all the meetings we've had to date. We've had 7 of them, and they've spanned a variety of different topics from what is deconstruction, why does it matter, reuse markets for building materials. Our most recent webinar focused on workforce development in deconstruction and mass. And I will put a link to the chat to those previous meetings. We've recorded them so you can take a look and take a dive into them on your own time if you're interested. Next slide. Now that we've done a lot of learning together as a group, we're starting to think about what's needed to enable more building material reuse and deconstruction in Massachusetts. And then, of course, thinking about what is MassDEP's role in supporting this work through all the things we normally do, through grants, technical assistance, making connections, thinking about policy, and then putting resources out there that can help enable growth in this field, in this sector. And so we are currently planning an in-person workshop, or some people call a charrette. I'll let people look up what that is on their own time. But really the goal is to bring people together, all these stakeholders that have already been coming to our meetings and other folks who should be at the table, to think about what are the actionable steps in Massachusetts to grow deconstruction, to grow building material reuse here in our state. And then we'd like to gather feedback on our ideas as MassDEP of how we support this work. And so you can see a list on the slide of some of the folks we've already been partnering with as thought collaborators and who we'll like to see at this in-person meeting. And so stay tuned. We'll have more about this. We're still deep in the planning process, but we'll be sharing more specifics about that meeting when we have them hammered out. Next slide, please. Another project we've been working on in close collaboration with Recycling Works in Massachusetts is developing best practices for reusable food serviceware. Apologies if you can hear a siren in the background. Hopefully you can't. The best practices are user-friendly guidance, really with the goal of enabling increased use of reusable food serviceware and really reducing that priority material single-use packaging that we want to see less of. And then having best practices that also ensure food safety and consistency with the food code. These best practices are best practices. They're not requirements. Just want to emphasize that. And they're geared toward local health officials and food service businesses that may be thinking about reusables and how to effectively use them while staying within the food code requirements. Right now, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health is reviewing them. That the document we put together is in their hands. And once we get final feedback from them, we will make that public. And we're thinking about where that will live and trying to put a lot of thought about where to put it so it's most accessible and how to get it into the hands of the folks who need it and would like to take a look at it. Next slide, please. Another material stream with a lot of reuse potential is textiles. And there's been a lot of work in the textile recovery space, not necessarily the focus of our Reduce and Reuse working group, but definitely happening in the broader MassDEP ecosystem and our other groups here at MassDEP. Textiles, as many of you know, are a pretty substantial part of our waste stream, representing more than 5%. And like I said, they're a valuable material. There's a strong demand for textiles, and they can be captured for reuse and or recycling for little to no cost. Also, as many of you know, we had a waste ban that went into effect back in November 2022. And since then, there's been a lot of support for textile recovery coming from a range of MassDEP grant programs, from grants that support more of the market development side of things to grants that support municipal programs that serve residents. And I'll put a link in the chat for more information on textile recovery and MassDEP's work in that space after I'm through this presentation. Next slide, please. As we start to think ahead, I also wanted to preview our next area of focus, which we're calling bulky items. Bulky items encompasses two of the priority materials on the list that you saw a few slides back, and that includes household durable goods, so like large appliances and furniture, and then also the business side of things. So business furniture, fixtures, equipment, and that represents a big part of our waste stream. Think about all the stuff that could be going to a furniture bank or home improvement store that ends up in the trash and takes up a lot of space. And it's often mixed with C and D materials, which of course we don't want because there's a big opportunity for reuse and repair. We're still organizing and planning how we'll tackle this stream. But luckily, there's a lot of great work already happening in our state in this space. So more to come on that as we wrap up our other projects, and we'll be in our next meetings starting to think about where we'll head to address this stream. Next slide. And then finally, since it's related, I wanted to give a couple quick updates about our reduce, reuse, repair microgrants. As a reminder, the microgrants are for short-term reuse and repair projects that take a year or less to complete. So compost and recycling projects are not eligible for these grants. And for-profit and nonprofit entities can apply. This year, we bumped up the award to $10,000 and had a deadline, which we think, both of those factors contributed to a record number of applications, which is super exciting. So exciting to see so much work happening in the reuse space and people taking advantage of this resource. We awarded 23 of them, which equated to more than $140,000 of grant funds. And I wanted to say, too, that we intended to have a second round of microgrants this year. The deadline was going to be November 15th, but due to the amount of time it took to award and process the first round of grants, we won't be having a second round. The next round will likely be announced early next year, and we'll publicize it once we have a date. So please stay tuned for that. Keep checking back on the microgrants webpage, and we'll be putting out announcements through our usual MassDEP communications channels. And in the meantime, if you have questions or are interested in applying, I encourage you to check out our microgrants webpage, which includes an overview of the grant process. It also has guidelines which spell out specifics to help people as they're applying. I'll put another link in the chat for that too, if there hasn't been one put in there already. Next slide. Final slide. So that's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions or you want to connect. I'll also drop a link in the chat to our main Reduce and Reuse webpage, where you can dig into those past recordings, the action plan itself, and you can join our listserv where we post meeting announcements and other reuse-related opportunities. So thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks for your time today. Obviously, this work group is very busy. A lot going on in this space, and it's exciting to think, maybe about some strides that can be made with bulky items here in the future coming up. So I'm, other than a kudo and John posting a link to clothing and textile recovery on our website, I do see a hand up from Clint. So Clint, if you would like to take yourself off mute, feel free to ask your question.
Hi, thanks, Sean. I'm Clint Richmond from the Massachusetts Sierra Club. I also serve on the Brookline Solid Waste Advisory Committee. I wanted to react a little bit to the reusable foodware. It looked like I apologize, I haven't been on one of these meetings in a while, but it looked like the reusable foodware was oriented toward off-site foodware, so you could bring in your own cup or have a third-party service. I was wondering if there's going to be any focus given to traditional reusables, which are on-site, where you have a dishwasher, a commercial dishwasher, and more durable foodware, because we're still trying to get away from plastic, and a lot of the third-party services are plastic, and they can produce microparticles or whatever when they're washed and release other substances when they're exposed to high heat. I think that's a more sustainable option to go traditional, but I know there are space conditions or cost conditions. There have been grants in some other jurisdictions to food to restaurants, and so anyway, I was wondering if there was any discussion, has been any discussion about that to date.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And Recycling Works folks on the call, feel free to jump in, or Janice Perret, if you'd like. But what I can say is that there's definitely a lot of relevant information in the best management practices that we'll be putting out that apply to those situations. And there's also like quite a bit of opportunity with our different grants, whether it's the micro grants or grants for municipalities, if it's, say, a school thinking about reusables. So there's a lot of grant opportunity there. But yeah, a lot of the best management practice guidance applies, and there's different scenarios within that guidance. So there's guidance specifically for folks who are bringing their own reusable cup. There's guidance that applies more to, folks have in-house reusable dishware. Yeah. Anything to add from Recycling Works folks? Because you're certainly closer to this work.
Yeah, and I know that the Recycling Works team is going to weigh in this at length later. So not sure if maybe maybe some of that might be covered in the presentation or not.
Yes, we will touch on it.
Mhm.
And the short answer is that yes, the best practices discussed in the document can be applied, whether it is a customer owned container or a establishment owned container being used inside or outside of the organization.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. And yes, John.
And I was just going to add to that. I think the sort of traditional, restaurant washing their own dishware is a pretty well established practice and well accepted by local public health officials. So there's less of a need for guidance around that. What we felt the real issue that required guidance was more these third-party washing services, customer provided containers and things like that, where there's more uncertainty from a public health perspective about how those ought to be controlled.
That's exactly right, Joan. Yes, because the procedures or processes recommended for the reusables is essentially exactly what the procedure the restaurant or uses for their permanent wear.
Okay. I am also noticing a comment in the chat or a question in the chat from Kevin saying, would this grant be applicable for e-waste reduction? I assume he's talking about the reduce, reuse, repair micro grants. And I think the answer there would be yes, Leah, based on some of the entities we funded in the past.
Right. Yep. We have funded that work before. Just reminder that these grants focus on reuse and repair. So if it's a reuse and repair project, yes. If it's a project that focuses on recycling, and Janice just responded that way. So perfect. Yes, reuse and repair is the focus.
Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for your thoughtful questions. Thank you, Leah, for your presentation. And we'll move it along next to Mike Elliott, who has an update on construction and demolition and some of the work that's been going on with that subcommittee. So Mike, I'll send it over to you. I'll advance the slide here.
Thanks, Sean, and good morning, everyone. Sean, we can just go to the next slide, please. So the first of two topics I want to highlight this morning is the incremental increases to the C&D process separation rate minimum threshold that was announced this past July. MassDEP updated the C&D minimum performance standard to reflect the incremental increases in the PSR minimum threshold through 2030. And there's a live link to the on this slide here to the latest NPS update if you want to check it out. As further effort to ensure effective outreach, a memorandum describing the process separation rate incremental increases was also circulated to all members of the C&D subcommittee, email distribution lists, and to contacts of record for all large C&D handling facilities back in July. And program reminders were communicated at the most recent C&D subcommittee meeting that was held on October 1st. Next slide, please, Sean. Based on the data reported in the 2022 waste characterization study that was commissioned by MassDEP, MassDEP is very confident that the incremental increases to the PSR minimum threshold from the current 15% to 25% by 2030 are achievable. As summarized in figure 4-7, shown on the right-hand side of the slide, the composition by waste type analysis documented in the waste characterization study demonstrated that C&D materials accepted at Massachusetts C&D handling facilities contained 37% and 43% waistband materials in bulky waste and C&D waste, respectively. And I looked back at our 2016 market study just prior to the meeting, and those numbers were even higher, but it's around 40%. 40% of what comes in as bulky waste and C&D is waistband material. So this is further evidence to support that a 25% process separation rate minimum threshold is very doable. Now, to allow time for C&D handling facilities to adapt their operations to meet or exceed these levels of improved performance, and some are already exceeding these levels, by the way, the 3 incremental increases are spaced out over 5 years. Okay, next slide, please, Sean. The second topic I want to highlight this morning is the effort underway to make improvements to the C&D facility annual report forms. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Sean. By way of background, I want to remind folks that large C&D handling facilities are required to submit their annual report data on a separate C&D facility annual report form. It provides more detail than the general solid waste facility annual report form. For example, it breaks out C&D material quantities separate from MSW material quantities. And within the C&D material management section, it drills down deeper into recycled, diverted, and transferred materials. That said, there are some inconsistencies between different facilities and how the form is filled out. So in order to improve the precision and accuracy of submitted data, MassDEP is working with our C&D stakeholders to revise the forms and the accompanying instructions. Suggested improvements are based largely on 3 types of input: the observations and experience of MassDEP staff who review the data annually. I'm one of those staff members. The best practices identified in annual report requirements in surrounding states, and the observations and experience of the construction managers who rely on this data to demonstrate to their clients that they are meeting green building standards and other applicable sustainability goals. MassDEP conducted a workshop as a hybrid meeting a couple of weeks ago on October 21st. We had about, in total, I think there were about 22 or 23 people who participated in that workshop. Based on the ideas discussed at the workshop, MassDEP will draft revisions to the C&D facility and report form and the instruction document. Our goal is to complete the internal management review and approval of the proposed revisions by the end of the year to be available for use in 2025 when the next annual reports are due. And then, of course, as part of our efforts for continual improvement, midway through 2025, the C&D subcommittee will evaluate the effectiveness of the revisions and recommend further revisions as necessary. Next slide, please, Sean. Here are some useful online resources. Whoops. Wait, Sean, catch me. There we are. Here are some useful online resources pertaining to the C&D Materials Management Program, where you can find more information on the subject. And the last slide, please, Sean. Here's my contact information. And I want to thank all of you this morning for this opportunity to provide this brief glimpse of the important issues we are working on in the C&D subcommittee, please feel free to contact me if you wish to be added to the email distribution list for this group. That ends the presentation on C&D subcommittee.
Okay, I'm having some trackpad difficulty with my computer here, but anyways, besides that silliness, we do have a chat question here. Could you please define process separation rate for the good of the group? Is there a handy definition that you have, Mike?
Yeah, so the process separation rate is it's actually defined. So if you the link in the very first slide there to the minimum performance standard does have a detailed description of the process separation rate, but it's the ratio of the quantity of material that has been recycled, converted, as a fuel for energy recovery, or diverted for recycling through another recycling outlet. So basically, all the material recycled and reused divided by the total inbound material received. We do not give credit in the process separation rate for landfill-dependent uses like alternative daily cover, road-based stabilization, or grading and shaping at a landfill.
All right, I think that is suitable there. I see John put a handy link in the chat there on what the minimum performance standards. And yeah, we're moving forward to 2030. It's kind of exciting. Any other chats, any other questions that folks would like to ask Mike? Okay. And certainly there will be time at the end of the meeting too, or offline. Mike is eminently available for any and all of these conversations.
Yeah. One word of caution. For some reason, my work cell phone, the SIM card failed on me yesterday. So I ordered a new SIM card, but in the meantime, that phone number is not working, but hopefully it'll be working by next week at the latest.
Oh, what do you mean, Mike? You're ducking these calls here. I know you know. Hopefully that gets fixed, but yeah, email would be good, I'm sure. And I know certainly from Mike's involvement in this process that he's very available and transparent on these conversations. So thanks for your time this morning.
Since the pandemic, everybody has my personal cell phone anyway.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Exactly. You just go back to that. All right. Well, we've heard from Leah, we've heard from Mike. Let's move along to John Fisher. Some updates on some of our organic diversion activities. We'll go from C&D to organics here. John, you can feel free to go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Sean. You can just move ahead to the next slide here.
There we go. My mouse is working again. Good.
Lots of content to cover here, and I will do my best to be concise about it. And there's lots more information available up on our website and on our organic subcommittee webpage for people who want to dig it deeper. So big picture of food waste, this is not new. Food waste represents just over 20% of our overall trash. That's our regular trash from households and businesses. So that equates to a little over 900,000 tons a year. We estimate slightly more coming from businesses and institutions than residents, but significant amounts from both sectors. Our goal in our 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan was building off a 2018 baseline, where at that point we were diverting about 280,000 tons on an annual basis. And our goal is to increase that by 500,000 tons on an annual basis by 2030, which would get us up to 780,000 tons of total diversion. And just a little bit of context for that and what we expect to accomplish through our waste ban and supporting initiatives. When we developed our regulatory packages for each of those bans, the 2014 ban, we estimated that we could increase diversion from the then baseline of 100,000 tons to about 300,000 tons per year. And the 2022 ban, we estimated that would bring in potentially another 100,000 tons of food material that we could divert on an annual basis. So next slide. will show us how we've done so far. So the short answer here is that we're doing pretty well relative to those expectations. So what you see here going across is the years, starting with 2016 on the left. That was the first year we started really getting consistent data across these different forms of food waste diversion. You can see going down the rows include anaerobic digestion, composting, animal feed, food donation, and what we call other, which are facilities that my understanding is discharge food material to a wastewater system. So it's diverting from solid waste, but not necessarily the same as any of the other diversion categories. You can see in the bottom row, we've made substantial progress. Again, we're working off of a baseline prior to this data, an estimated baseline of about 100,000 tons back in 2012. And we've gotten up to about 380,000 tons by 2030 or by 2023, but we have a long way to go still to meet our 2030 goals. So, we expect we can still do more with diverting food waste from large to medium-sized businesses. But as we go, we'll be focusing more and more on small business and residential food waste. I'll be talking more about that in a minute. Next slide, please. Not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but this gives you a sense of the progress we've made with business and institutional food waste reduction. This is data from haulers that collect food waste from businesses and institutions. Shows that more than doubling from when we implemented our first waste ban in 2014 up through 2023. Of course, we want to continue to make additional progress beyond this, but we feel like we've made a lot of progress to date over this period. Next slide, please. Okay, so we get a lot of questions, a lot of interest about waste ban inspections and enforcement. If you don't know this already, the way this works is we conduct inspections and monitor compliance at solid waste facilities and then look to identify the source of banned materials we observe in the trash and take enforcement from there. Going back to November of 2022, so that's when our most recent waste ban took effect, we've inspected upwards of 4,400 loads of trash. Going back to October 2014, we've inspected over 45,000 loads of trash. Very small fraction of the loads of trash during that period, but a significant amount of inspections during that period. For food material alone, there's been lots of other waste ban enforcement for other materials, but for food material alone, we're getting up close to 150 enforcement actions. Most of those are notices of noncompliance, which is our initial enforcement does not carry a penalty. We've done 14 consent orders with a penalty for disposal of food material. We did, in the past year, we hired 2 new waste ban inspectors. We've been increasing our waste ban inspections on an annual basis. We expect that will continue to grow a little bit more. And recently, we've started to see an uptick in the enforcement actions that have been generated from those increased inspections. So while ideally we'd love to do inspections and see no violations and have no need for enforcement, we're not there yet. So we continue to issue enforcement for the violations we're observing. We will, we already do, and we will continue to post the waste ban inspection or the waste ban enforcement that we issue on a 6-month basis. That's up on our website. I'll grab a link to that I can stick in the chat when I'm done speaking, unless someone else beats me to it. We'll continue to update that every 6 months. So in January, we'll post the latest round of inspection or enforcement updates. Next slide, Sean. We also do a lot of compliance-related communication to businesses. So we'll issue letters that are not enforcement action, but they may be based on what we consider either a borderline load observation, facility data, or third-party data. And then we've also been sending formal request for information letters to individual businesses in targeted sectors. These do require a response from the business about how they're complying with the food waste disposal ban. So far, we've issued letters to about 50 companies representing 700 locations, and we're going to continue to do that. and continue to try to reach out to all the companies that we believe may need to comply with our food waste ban to get information on how they are complying. Next slide, please. So all of this work is supported by other significant programs. We have our Recycling Works Massachusetts program. You'll be hearing from Steve about that program in a few minutes. Through the years, they've delivered more than 750 assistance deliveries to different businesses and institutions. Recycling Works also runs a compost site assistance program that Steve will talk a little bit more about. We also have done awarded a significant number of grants and loans to support our food waste reduction infrastructure. We have another large grant round that we expect to be announced shortly. I can't tell you exactly when, but we have a announcement that's going through our review process now and hope to have that out soon. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to kind of breeze through these slides, but this is a little taste of things to come as we continue to make progress and continue to work on reducing and diverting wasted food from businesses. We're starting to focus more on residential food waste. Notification here, sorry about that. So already, this is as of 2023, and I know it's grown since then. We have about 90 municipalities that have reported some type of municipally supported food waste collection program. 72 of those reported drop-off programs, 12 curbside, and 5 a combination. And in 2023, they reported collecting a little bit over 20,000 tons of food material. And we also have 167 municipalities that report selling home compost bins to residents, typically at a discounted rate. I know that's how I manage the bulk of my food waste here. Never leaves my home, never leaves my yard, and it's a great way to go if you have the space and the inclination to do it. And then we also will hear more about our Green Team program for schools, but one of the things we do through that program is we distribute recycling and composting equipment. And we've distributed compost bins to 140 schools and counting to set up on-site composting programs, and we're looking forward to doing more of that. Next slide, please. We also support residential food waste reduction through our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program grants. That's another program we are looking to get an announcement out about shortly. One of the really significant programs within that is our Recycling Dividends program. The way that works is municipalities earn points for implementing certain programs. Each of those points is worth a certain amount of money. We receive their application, give them points based on the number of programs they're implementing, and then those payments then can get reinvested in the municipal programs. So relative to the criteria for implementing organics and food waste diversion programs, municipalities earned about $320,000 in RDP funding last year. And in the past few years, municipalities reported spending a little over $600,000 of that funding on setting up food waste diversion programs. So that's really exciting to see that growth. And then I'll also note that the Recycling Works Composting Assistance Program, while Recycling Works is a business assistance program, we have had 10 municipal compost sites that accept food material take advantage of that program assistance, and we'd love to do more of that, supporting municipal compost sites that take food material. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of wrapping things up here. So as we move forward, we're at what I think of as a little bit of a pivot point. We're continuing to focus on increasing diversion of food material from businesses. We're continuing to invest in our infrastructure, both through our Recycling Business Development grants and our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program grants for municipal composting infrastructure. Really thinking more and more about distributed capacity and growing our collection capacity. That's been a growing emphasis. We are looking to do more on supporting, informing, fostering more residential food waste reduction and prevention initiatives, and we'll be talking more about that. Supporting growth of composting, I've mentioned the Recycling Works Technical Assistance Program, and continuing to support school composting programs through the Green Team. And then again, talking about more about what we can collectively and individually do to prevent food waste to begin with. So I think that's all I got. The next slide here is resources that, oh, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. So one more slide, sorry about that. So
Not
what all
yet,
that,
John.
yeah, I'm trying to be quick. All of that transition is going towards a discussion that we'll be engaging in over the course of the next year, which is where do we go with our food waste disposal ban going forward? And there's a number of factors we need to think about in making that decision. There's been no decision made one way or another about that, and we'll be having much more discussion about this in the year ahead. But some of the things we need to think about is how effective are voluntary programs? How far can we get through voluntary approaches? And how much do we need a waste ban? We need to think about the cost effectiveness of the collection system from smaller sources. That's going to be really important. If we're going to implement a ban at a smaller level, we need to be able to ensure cost-effective collection and diversion programs. What's the ability of our infrastructure to manage more material, including material that may potentially have more contaminants in it, and that's something that's going to be a really important factor. If we're going to be sending this material to animal feed, to composting, to anaerobic digestion, it's really critical that we do a good job of collecting clean material without things like plastic, bottles and cans, all sorts of things like that. And then what's our ability to inspect, enforce, and effectively ensure compliance with the reduced waste ban threshold? That's obviously an important factor for us as well. So those are some of the things we're starting to think about. We will be talking more about this in 2025. So for those of you who are interested in engaging in that discussion, we'd love to add you to the email list for our organics subcommittee email list. And now I think I have my additional resources slide, which again, don't worry about this too much right now. We'll post this with all the meeting materials, and you can grab these links afterwards. So I believe that is all I've got.
All right. Thanks, John. That's a lot of information. I'm sorry to say that you're not exactly going to get a rest right here because there are a bunch of questions. With deference to our other speakers, maybe some of these can be talked about more offline or maybe at the end of the meeting. But just a couple of ones that I think would be easy for yes, no at this point to start. Clint says, food diverted for animal feed cannot be used by certified organic farms, correct?
I cannot speak to that question, so I'm not certain of the answer for that.
That was a great one for me to lead with there, apparently.
Sorry about that.
Okay. And we also have one, Kendall says, inspection enforcement solely focused on organics or also able to issue violations for other matters, e.g. truck safety, etc.
Yeah, I see Rob responded to this. So truck safety, no, that's not something we specifically inspect for, but what we're inspecting for is any significant disposal of any significant waste material and loads of trash. That's what we're in our inspections. And when I say our, I mean staff out of the Boston office who are
Right.
specifically focused on waste ban compliance. That's what we're looking for. And then in turn, we look to identify the source of the loads and issue enforcement to those entities. Of course, our regional office staff are going out and also conducting inspections at all of our facilities, and those are focused more on solid waste facility compliance with our regulations and permit requirements. And I'll just take this other one here from David about the enforcement actions, and most of them not involving penalties. We often see that we can get good compliance through a notice of non-compliance. Many times, businesses that receive enforcement for us actually have a collection program in place for the material that they're receiving enforcement for. And there's just something that's lapsed with the program. And oftentimes a notice of non-compliance is adequate to either get a company's existing program fixed or to get them started with a new program if they in fact don't have a program. So We see that across most materials that we get pretty good compliance from most businesses with a notice of noncompliance. And if that's the case, that's great because that takes an order of magnitude less of our time than doing a consent order with a penalty. So if we get compliance for an NON, that's best. If we need to, we see a repeat violation from the same entity. That's when we go to a consent order. But the fact is, typically 90% of the time we don't need to go that route.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it, John. I also noticed that Rob put in the spreadsheet of waistband enforcement, so you don't have to copy paste that link that's in the chat. Phil Goddard also had a question. He said, "What explains the 2/3 drop in compost tonnage?" That was one of the slides there.
Yeah, we've had a lot of sites that accepted food material for composting do one of two things: stop accepting food material or close their operation, and oftentimes that's due to concerns and opposition from neighboring communities and residents over potential or real nuisance and odor impacts from those composting operations. So it's there's been a lot of that going on with compost operations. So a lot of operations have either closed or stopped taking food material and just focused on leaf and yard waste composting. So that's one of the reasons why, we really emphasize the Recycling Works Compost Site Assistance Program to work with compost operations to do a better job controlling odor and nuisance concerns going forward. I think, part of the dynamic also is that many of those sites at one point did not have close neighbors and now maybe do due to development over time. So that dynamic has changed through the years. So we're looking to try to support that as best we can. But on the other hand, we also have a enforcement and compliance role over those compost operations to make sure they're operating without nuisance and odor impacts.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate your time. I am going to move it along to Claudine here for the market development group update. Some important stuff happening there. We recently had a meeting and we have an upcoming grant program announcement. So appreciate everyone's questions for John. Of course, we're happy to answer them offline if there's anything more. And hopefully we do have a little bit more time for discussion at the end of this meeting. So Claudine.
All right. Thanks, John. So as part of recycling and reuse market development, I'll provide an update on the R&D action plan, a brief recap of our meetings 1 through 8. We just recently had one in September. And just a reminder on the structure of the action plan itself. I'll also provide a bit of information from our guidance for recycling businesses in Massachusetts document, which has been available online at mass.gov as of June of this year. And I'll also touch upon our Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant and Recycling Loan Fund Awards, and talk briefly about our upcoming Waste Reduction Innovation Grant. Next slide, please. So over the past 2 years or so, as we mentioned, we've held 8 working groups thus far as part of this recycling market development effort. The first meeting covered MassDEP's current market development programs, including the Recycling Business Development Grant, Recycling Loan Fund, waste bans, and municipal grants and buy recycled requirements. At this first introductory meeting, we also had representatives covering some other in-state market development programs, including the Operational Services Division, or OSD's Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program, as well as Mass Development and the Mass Office of Business Development. Our second meeting focused on regional and national perspectives, with meetings 3 through 6 focusing on topics including business support, demand side strategies, education and outreach, and research and development. These meetings also included 4 different breakout groups for 1 packaging, 2 organics, 3 construction and bulky materials, and 4 materials with new and evolving or emerging markets. And meeting 7 of last year, 2023, was around the action plan itself and structured around barriers and solutions. And And at a high level, we continue to see the main barriers to market development being primarily technical, logistical, and economic. Lastly, our last meeting, September 17th of 2024, we provided recent updates, including some of the things I'll be going over again today. And we also had excellent presentations from EPA, SBIR, MassTEP M2I2, MassHire, as well as 2M. Next slide, please. So we see the solutions as much of what we discussed and received valuable input on during the 8 working groups or so, to include primarily business support and economic development, demand side strategies, and R&D. So that R&D includes product testing and development of new technologies. We also see education, outreach, networking, and information sharing as a solution and as part of all 3 of these categories. Next slide, please. So as part of our efforts to support businesses and economic development in expanding recycling market infrastructure and opportunities, we created a recycling business guidance document. And this includes general business guidance information on the Massachusetts Office of Business Development, MassHire Career Information System, the U.S. Small Business Administration, and the Supplier Diversity Office. We also included relevant supportive information on MassDEP permitting requirements, financial and technical assistance, webinars and workshops, as well as grants and loans. Next slide, please. So since the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant Program began in 2016, MassDEP has completed its 8th round solicitation for projects under this RBDG program and has awarded over 75 grants, totaling more than $8.5 million. So this latest round, our largest ever, potentially subject to some finalized contract agreements here, would include a distribution of over $2 million in grants to 22 businesses and nonprofits across the state. So very excited about that. And these grants will enable Massachusetts recycling companies to expand and grow their operations and increase the amount and quality of recycling in the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. And here's just a simple breakdown of the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant Awards and award amounts by a variety of material categories, including food, mattresses, textiles, glass, C&D, plastic, reuse, commingled recyclables, and furniture. Next slide, please. And for our Market Development Recycling Loan Fund, dating back to a program start date of 1996 and administered under contract to MassDEP by BDC Capital, this fund has provided 89 loans totaling over $20.3 million to 60 different Massachusetts businesses. Next slide, please. And here's just a simple breakdown of Recycling Loan Fund awards by material type, including food, paper, plastics, metal, C&D, electronics, commingled recyclables, textiles, and wood. Next slide, please. And in terms of enhancing investment to advance waste reduction, innovation, and business development, per the Solid Waste Master Plan, MassDEP will advance R&D for new waste reduction and recycling technologies and strategies and expand its grant programs to foster development and expansion of recycling markets. So as part of this effort, we will create a new grant program to invest in innovation, committing over $1 million in initial funding. So MassDEP is currently drafting guidelines for this innovation grant, and we have sought stakeholder input and received valuable input as of mid-October, I believe. And in terms of materials to target, next slide, please. We're kind of seeking to prioritize materials with limited outlets, such as glass and wood and asphalt shingles, as well as prioritize materials with additional market development opportunities. So, such as recycling outlets for textiles. We've seen the reuse infrastructure for textiles to be quite strong. We're also looking to address problematic materials within this grant, such as lithium-ion batteries, and bulk items. We do plan to tentatively post this application, this innovative grant, in March of 2025. So looking forward to that. And I think that's all I have for now. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Claudine. Another presentation here that was chock full of information, but you made it through very efficiently here. We do have one question in the chat from Vanessa. I think she's referring to the innovation grant. She says, does this include waste to energy technologies?
John, would you like me to answer that, or I do know the answer?
Waste to energy technologies, I would say no, it does not.
Any follow-up, Vanessa, feel free to add to the chat or raise your hand. Any other questions for Claudine on market development? Please feel free. But, as someone who's been involved in this process and these conversations for the last few years here, I'm definitely excited about where things are going. I think, we can all be excited about, announcing new sources of funding and hopefully making some strides to divert more materials, as we're always looking to do. At that point, I think that's it for our update. So thank you to all, Leah, Mike, John, and Claudine. I'll quickly transition over here. We'll see how quickly to the solid waste data. And once again, John will be called to the floor here to present on the 2023 MassDEP solid waste data update. Let me just pull that up. Okay, John.
Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with this, we prepare these solid waste data updates on an annual basis. We've been doing this for quite a while. Typically, what we do before we actually finalize and post the report is we hold a presentation like this for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. That's in part just a briefing and to let everyone know what the data says, but also every now and then someone catches something that's off with one of our tables. We maybe need to make a correction or address a potential error or inconsistency. So it's also kind of a little bit of a final QA/QC check before we post the document on our website. So with that, I will dive in. If you can go to the next slide. And I'll also note that the data that I'm presenting here is what we call solid waste disposal data. And so what that means, that does not include recycling data, composting data, anaerobic digestion. It only includes material that's going to solid waste facilities for disposal. I'll talk later. There are a couple ancillary data points that reflect materials management at solid waste facilities that's not technically disposal, and I'll clarify that when I get to that. But all this data that I'm talking about is about solid waste disposal. So just so we're clear on the scope of this. The first table here is a summary for 2022 and 2023. And so you can see going across, we have a column for each year, then a tonnage change from year to year, and a percent change from year to year. Going down in the rows, we have the total disposal on the top, and then we have that's divided into in-state disposal, both landfills and municipal waste combustion, and then out-of-state disposal. So just a note on the math here, the total at the top is the sum of the in-state disposal plus the net exports. So the imports and exports, the way that works is waste routinely crosses state boundaries, and the flow of that waste is reflected in the reports that we receive from solid waste facilities. So the exports are the amount of waste that goes from Massachusetts to a disposal facility in another state. The imports are the waste that comes from a facility in a different state to a Massachusetts solid waste facility for disposal. So those exports minus the imports are net exports. So that's just kind of how the table structure and the math works here. And the way I characterize this overall, my take on this data, one is we're seeing a slight disposal increase, which is directionally opposite from what we want to see, right? We want to see disposal dropping. So we saw a 3% increase, and that's obviously going in the wrong direction from what we would like to see. I'll talk more about that and some contextual information around that in a few minutes. In-state disposal, you can see is largely remaining steady from 2022 to 2023. My next slide, I'll show a longer term going back to 2018, and it's changed a little bit during that time period. But in the last year, the in-state disposal remained relatively flat, and that's not surprising. That's kind of fixed capacity. And the difference is the increased amount of waste going for disposal to other states on a net basis. So that's kind of, the overall direction of the change here. There'll be more detailed slide on the import and export in a minute. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So this is that same data, just going back to 2018. So I'm not going to bother explaining all the rows here. It's the same rows I just showed you, and the 2022 and 2023 data are the same. This just shows over a longer time period. And 2018 is important because that was a baseline year for our 2030 solid waste master plan. So you can see, again, it's kind of bumped up and down along the way, but an overall increase from 2018 to 2023. Again, not the direction we want to be going, an overall increase of about 500,000 tons of total disposal. That comes out to about 9% on a percentage increase. I'll talk more about percentage changes in a minute. So you can see here the in-state disposal has changed over this time period. So the in-state landfilling has dropped significantly, which we expected to see because we knew certain in-state disposal facilities were closing. We also saw a little bit of a drop in in-state municipal waste combustion. Two small combustion facilities in Springfield and Pittsfield closed, and that dropped the overall amount of waste going through municipal waste combustion facilities. You can also see this more significant trend in increased net export, and that's due to a combination of that 500,000 tons increased disposal and the top line, combined with the reduced in-state landfilling. So the net effect of that is more waste going for disposal to facilities in other states on a net basis. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on a state-by-state basis in a minute. So again, this is, the significant changes over this time period, a little bit of drop in in-state disposal, increase in overall solid waste disposal, and the combined larger effect in the amount of waste going to disposal facilities in other states for disposal. Next slide, please, Sean. Okay, this slide, I'm gonna, suggest you take this maybe with a grain of salt a little bit. MSW and non-MSW disposal at solid waste facilities can get a little bit tricky. And it's probably not the most reliable part of this data, the split between municipal solid waste and non-municipal solid waste. There are facilities that take both, and it's not always crystal clear what is what on a daily basis, individual load basis. So there's a little bit of, potential for inconsistency on the MSW and non-MSW breakdown. With that said, it's a number still that's worth looking at. And the non-MSW, by the way, you may ask, what is that? The bulk of that is construction and demolition waste. So the non-municipal solid waste, that's primarily what it is. It can also include other materials a wide range of other materials like contaminated soils, dredge sediments, um, a whole bunch of other materials that potentially enter the solid waste management system. We only track those materials in this report if they're going to a solid waste facility for disposal. So there's a whole bunch of those materials that are being generated and managed and flowing in different ways outside the solid waste system. This data only shows if they're going to a solid waste facility for disposal. So you can see, you know, roughly 3/4 municipal solid waste, about a quarter non-municipal solid waste. The numbers that I'm going to highlight here are the percent change versus 2018 and the percent change versus 2022. So that's on the right-hand side of the chart here. So overall disposal, you can see went up 9% from 2018, 3% from 2022. We already touched on that in the prior slides. You can see the MSW increase was less, and in fact, up until last year, it was actually a slight decrease. So the MSW jumped up a little bit in this past year, but up until the past year, basically had stayed flat. The more significant growth over this 5-year period was in non-MSW and C and D in particular. Again, that you know varies a little bit year to year, but over the 5-year period, a significant increase. Let me go to the next slide, please. So this is that import-export data from the prior slide broken out by state. So again, just to orient you to this slide and what this data is and what's where, you can see the export data is in the top half of the slide. The import data is in the bottom half of the slide. MSW on the left-hand side, non-MSW on the right-hand side. And this is just a 2-year comparison. If you're interested, we have all of our past solid waste data updates are up on our website. You can kind of go back and see what it looked like in prior years, but just for kind of keeping this manageable, we've kept it to a 2-year comparison in this table. You can see, you know, the increase from 2022 to 2023 in MSW export in the upper left quarter there. Although there was a significant increase in the amount reported going to New York in this past year, the overall trend, and this is more significant when you go back over the 5-year period, is more waste is traveling farther for disposal. And it's going to more states. There are some states that we didn't see in this import-export data a few years ago that are now significant recipients of waste from Massachusetts. So some of those ones, we're just doing the 2 state abbreviations here. Hopefully everyone knows our state abbreviations, but if you don't, we have Alabama on here, we have Michigan, we have South Carolina, Virginia, and Ohio, all of which are receiving large amounts of waste for disposal, typically via rail. And you can see that's also holds true for Ohio in particular for the non-MSW, again, primarily C and D export in the upper right. And, you know, the import data is much less significant. You can see some more kind of import data within the region, but that tonnage is much less significant. And we continue to be a substantial net exporter of waste for disposal. That trend has been true for a while, but as you saw in the data on the previous slides, it's increased over the past few years. Next slide, please, Sean. And I realize probably a lot of what I'm talking about here, you guys may have questions about. I'm not looking at the chat as I speak, but I'm going to try to get through all of this in kind of a cohesive whole, and then happy to jump back to slides if I need to. So this data is kind of not part of the solid waste data update, but I put it in here because I think it's interesting, because as we have seen this little bit of an uptick in solid waste disposal, at the same time, we've seen a substantial reduction in disposal of food material. And we've seen some positive or negative trends that are positive for other materials like mattresses and textiles. So the point being here is that we've made some substantial progress with particular materials that we focused on, but we still see an overall growth in waste generation. And that's kind of an important point to highlight with this data, because we're really talking about kind of a rising overall tide of waste, even despite some of the program work that we're doing, achieving reductions with regard to specific priority materials. And there's reasons for that, which I will explain in the next slide. So historically, generally speaking, all things being equal, waste generation and waste disposal, give or take, more or less, tend to track with the economy. So one of the things that we look at through the years, and we've been doing this for a while, is we look at our gross domestic product by state, which is kind of a good overall measure of economic activity in Massachusetts. And we compare that to changes in disposal over time. So this chart shows that comparison going back to 2018. So you see the top row is the gross domestic product by state. And then we have disposal, total disposal, and then subcategories of MSW and non-MSW disposal below that. And what I want to highlight, because there's a lot of numbers here, what I want to highlight is the percentage changes on the right. So you can see from 2018 to, I just saw Claire's comment pop up, so I'm going to answer that. Is GDP adjusted for inflation? Yes. So that's the current dollar, millions of current dollars. And I'm not an economist and not sophisticated with this data, but basically, yes. So this kind of reflects real growth in economic activity. So you can see in the two columns on the right, we see in the past year, so this is the change versus 2022, the growth in GDP was a 9% growth. The growth in total disposal was 3% growth. So we have disposal increasing, but increasing at about 1/3 of the rate of increase in GDP. And we have basically the same trend going on with total disposal going back to 2018. So 32% growth in GDP, a little less than 1/3 of that growth in total disposal. So yes, we're seeing growth in total disposal, but we're seeing that growth at a fraction of the growth in the state economy during the same time period, which is a significant trend. The next slide is just a one way of graphing this, and we kind of went around with different ways to do this. I still don't know if this is the single best way to do it, but trying to kind of compare what these changes look like over time. It's a little bit distorted by this purple non-MSW disposal line, which goes up and then it goes down and it goes up. And that's kind of the variation in the non-MSW MSW split that we see through the years. The lines that I think are most representative here are the blue GDP line and the red total disposal line. So this shows the year-over-year percent change from 2019 through 2023 in each of these factors. And you can kind of see how it's tracking. Again, this, I think the non-MSW purple line's a little bit of a distortion here because it's bouncing up and down so much. But you can kind of see the general dynamic in the percent change, year-to-year percent change in these different variables. But going back to that data chart, we're seeing the overall growth in GDP still being significantly larger than the overall growth in disposal. So that's just, we don't necessarily have a direct causal explanation for this data. It's difficult for us to know for certain what's causing the growth in disposal, but we're pretty confident that a lot of it is just due to the overall growth in economic activity. And when the economy grows, people buy more, they use more, they dispose of more. Same with businesses. And same with construction. So there's definite correlation between economic activity and the generation of waste. So it's just an important contextual point to be aware of when we look at this data and how it's changing over time. Next slide, please, Sean. Okay, so now I'm going to shift gears a little bit, talk about just some of the other elements of the solid waste management system and some of the other data we collect, and then I will kind of transition at the end to a capacity projection picture. So this data, to be clear, is not included in any of the data on the other slides. We don't count ash from municipal waste combustion as part of our solid waste data. This is really kind of a subset of the material that goes to municipal waste combustors for disposal. So a subset of that material winds up as ash at the end of that combustion process. However, it does still require disposal, does still require management capacity. So we track that. So this shows our 5 active combustion facilities, the amount of ash they generated for disposal, where they reported sending that ash for disposal in 2023. And then kind of an interesting data point on the right is the amount of metal recovery, the amount of metal that's being recovered for recycling at our municipal waste combustion facilities. And this is done in potentially 2 different ways, 2 different points in the process. It can be done prior to combustion. That's done most extensively at the CMAS combustion facility in Rochester, or it can be done post-combustion metal recovery, or it can be a combination of the 2. So you can see, between the 2, capturing about 90,000 tons of metal for recycling metal that wouldn't have been recovered if it wasn't going to a combustion facility. So that's kind of what this slide shows the overall amount of ash that needs to be managed for disposal from the combustion process, and then shows the amount of metal that's being recovered. The next slide just gives a picture of the current projected capacity for ash disposal. These are landfills that are kind of categorized or considered as ash landfills. I'll note that other landfills can and do accept ash for disposal. A significant one is right now is the Bourne landfill. So this isn't necessarily the only places that ash can go for disposal, but this is landfills that are particularly focused or dedicated to accepting ash for disposal. So it gives you an idea of the projected capacity picture there for those facilities. Next slide, please, Sean. Okay, and another kind of capacity element, and this is also not included in any of the prior slides. This is outside of that. But landfills, when they accept waste, also accept material for use as cover material. Landfills need to use both daily and intermediate cover material to cover waste they receive on a daily basis, as well as in the process of covering cells as they fill them. So this shows the amount of material that our landfills reported using as cover material in 2023. And this is sorted from the largest amounts to the smallest. So again, this is material that's not considered disposal, but it is going to a landfill and is being deposited in a landfill. And I will leave it at that for this slide. Let me just try to, I want to get through the capacity here. So let me go ahead to the next slide. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. This hasn't changed significantly in the past year, but this relates to this whole net export dynamic that I spent a lot of time presenting in earlier slides. And this is how that net export happens in large degree. So when waste is going to more distant states for disposal, it's typically going by rail cars. And these are facilities in Massachusetts that either currently or potentially in the future may have the ability to transfer waste by rail. And you can see that presented on a tons per day basis and a tons per year basis. So you can see this is really where the solid waste industry has gone. From a capacity standpoint, there's little to no development of new disposal capacity in Massachusetts, and the solid waste infrastructure in Massachusetts has increasingly pivoted to rail-based transfer capacity. So that's kind of, correlates with the growth of net export, and the growth of net export going to more distant states from Massachusetts is through operations like these. Next slide, please. Okay, so These are a little bit complex charts. We made an effort to simplify these a little bit. It's gotten simpler in part because we honestly have so few in-state disposal facilities that the list gets shorter and shorter. But we made an attempt to kind of simplify the presentation of this data a little bit more. So hopefully this is helpful and comes across maybe a little more clearly and a little more simply than past years of this chart. So the way this works, and these next two slides go hand in hand. So this first one that I'm showing here will feed into the next one that I'm going to show you in a minute. So the gist of this is this shows projected capacity at in-state disposal facilities. On the top is our landfills. On the bottom is our municipal waste combustors. It's really kind of like the top third of the slide, the middle third, and then the bottom third is kind of the totals and notes. So the way this works is we show kind of the total permanent capacity for each. So at the bottom of the landfill section, you see we have total permanent landfill capacity. Then we adjust that downwards based on a historical usage of that capacity. Typically, the full capacity is not utilized at all of the landfills. So the projected capacity we show is a fraction of the total permanent capacity. That likely means that capacity will last longer than it's projected to. So that's kind of the flip side of that. But for purposes of projecting the in-state disposal capacity, we kind of discount it based on how it's been used in the past. So we don't assume the full permanent capacity is available every year. And we do the same thing with combustion capacity. The total permanent capacity really is, in some cases, a function of a facility's air permit, which doesn't always translate accurately to the operational capacity of that facility. So the way we deal with that to get a more kind of accurate capacity depiction of what really is the potential management capacity at those facilities, we do the same kind of downward adjustment, and we end up with a capacity of about 3 million tons a year for combustion capacity. So you put those together, the landfill capacity on the upper half, the combustion capacity, and that gives us our total projected in-state disposal capacity going forward. And right now we're just projecting through 2030. And you can see the good news, relatively good news, is that's projected to remain relatively flat through 2030, likely going to drop off significantly after 2030 for our landfills. But through 2030, a relatively kind of consistent in-state disposal capacity picture. So let me go to the next slide, please. Okay, so keep in mind what I just showed you. So what this shows is how that in-state management capacity feeds into kind of an overall capacity projection for the state and what our net export might look like based on that capacity projection. So again, as I've done with some of the prior charts, I'm going to kind of orient you to the chart first, and I'll talk about the data. So what we've got here again, 2024 to 2030, same time period as the prior table. And we show two scenarios. We show total disposal remaining flat based on where we're at right now. And then we show total disposal being reduced at a rate that we would need to meet the 2030 disposal reduction goal. Given where we're at this point in time, that would require a 6% reduction in disposal tonnage per year, which would be quite significant. But neither one of these projections is necessarily what we're saying is going to happen, but they're just two scenarios for projecting what disposal could be. And of course, it could be anywhere in between, and disposal could increase too. And whatever change happens with the disposal is going to play through this chart and have the corresponding impact in net disposal for export at the bottom. So if you said, hey, I want to use an assumption that disposal increases over this time period, maybe it goes up 500,000 tons, then the math is going to be really simple and you're going to see a growth of net export of 500,000 tons, just to kind of give you an idea about how that works. If you want to run your own numbers on this and come up with your own scenarios, you're welcome to do that. But these are the two that we've used. So you can see the top row, total disposal remaining flat. The second row, total disposal being reduced in line with what it would take to meet the 2030 disposal reduction goal. Then the middle rows are what the output from the prior sheet. So what's our total combustion capacity, what's our total potential landfill capacity, and what's the summed in-state disposal capacity. Then we take that number for each year, subtract it from the total disposal figure, and we come up with a projected net disposal for export. And that number, again, we do these kind of two scenarios, which arise from the top two rows in this chart. So net disposal for export based on disposal remaining flat, and then net disposal for export based on disposal being reduced in line with the 2030 disposal reduction goal. And you can see obviously a really substantial difference in what the projected net disposal for export would be in each of these scenarios. Because our in-state capacity is projected to remain relatively flat between now and 2030, if you assume flat disposal, you're going to get flat net disposal for export. If you assume really significant reduction in disposal in line with our 2030 goal, then you're going to really see a really substantial reduction in net disposal for export during this time period, getting down to close to kind of net zero export in 2030. Again, achieving really significant disposal reductions between now and 2030. So that's the disposal capacity projections, and I think I'm almost done here. I don't remember, Sean, if you just go to the next slide.
Yeah, John, I'm sure you're aware we're we're over here, but yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So sorry, tried to be as fast as I could, but also trying to provide at least a little bit of context for people. So I will wrap it up there. This is our past data updates. This report has not been posted yet, but we expect to post it after a final review in QA/QC shortly. And of course, when we do that, we'll let people know once the full report's been posted. But I can tell you that the full report I presented the gist of it right now. So that's all I got.
Yeah, and I would encourage folks, even if it's not right now, if you have any reactions to anything that you heard John say, that you have questions about, anything that you want to flag, we'll be posting these slides very soon to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee webpage. And if you want to take a look back at them, even, say in a couple days or whatever, get your feedback into John while we have a chance to accept it and do something about it. So thanks, John. Very complicated, but you made it as easy to understand as possible. Like the Sesame Street of solid waste. Sometimes we have to spell it out in a language we can all understand. So thank you, John. We'll move it over now to our friends from DEP. Stephen Banderas with us today, and also Sonia Williams. I'm going to bring up their presentation real quick, so they can tell us about what's going on with waste, or excuse me, with recycling works. Oh boy, good grief. Okay, so that folder, open it up. There it is. Oh, Sean. There it is. And we left you about 25 minutes. So hopefully that's adequate time here.
I think it will be.
Thank you, Stephen.
And that, I don't know if I'm seeing the right thing. This looks like John's.
I just double clicked on yours, and for some reason it's showing John still. Let me try it again.
I can attempt to do this one, but I know it won't be nearly as good as John.
Why is it? Yeah, it's just for some reason showing a blank document here. And I know I downloaded the right one. Try it again.
I'm more than happy to bring it up on my computer too.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you would do that, I apologize. Maybe the file got corrupted or something because I know we had some back and forth about using the right file, but I don't know what happened there. Thank you, Sonia.
There we go.
All
Great.
right,
All
we're in
right.
business.
Thank you, John. Sean, thank you, Sonia.
Oh, I didn't do anything. That was all Sonia. All right.
All right, here we go. Good morning. I'm Steve Bandera, and I'm the project manager for both Recycling Works in Massachusetts and the Green Team. I'm joined today, as you've heard, by my colleague Sonia Williams. And as we have done at SWAC meetings in the past, we'll be sharing updates on two MassDEP programs, Recycling Works and the Green Team, including accomplishments from the last fiscal year and what we're working on this year. Next slide. The Recycling Works program is designed to help Massachusetts businesses and institutions address waste. CET has been administering the program for over 10 years. We offer phone and email hotline, website with resources and guidance for specific materials and business sectors, as well as a comprehensive technical assistance service where we go on site to review operations, make recommendations, and help to facilitate implementation. Recycling Works in Massachusetts is funded by MassDEP, delivered under contract by CET. Next. Looking at our FY24 program priorities. Both programs are aligned with the MassDEP priorities outlined in the 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan, corresponding action plans, and agency-wide goals such as expanding language access and serving businesses and environmental justice communities. And we aim to incorporate these themes and priorities throughout all areas of the program. Waste reduction and reuse are high priorities in order to achieve MassDEP's waste disposal reduction goals. And as included in the MassDEP Reduce and Reuse Action Plan, one specific goal is supporting businesses and institutions transitioning from single-use to reusable foodware systems. We've been developing a set of consensus-based best practices for using reusable durable containers in food service and retail settings. And as I know you've heard a few times today, we will share a little bit more about that project later on. Looking at some metrics. Each year, we quantify our impact by estimating the amount of weight that is diverted from disposal per year as a result of our assistance. And we look at that across different material types and diversion strategies as illustrated here on this slide. These are likely an underestimation, as this only represents instances where we could reasonably determine that a new program was established or material was diverted. And as you can see, this amounted to nearly 1,800 tons of material diverted from disposal in FY24. We aim to quantify the overall diversion going back to the beginning of the program, which is estimated to be over 325,000 tons since 2013. And this assumes diversion continued since initial assistance. And we served about 200 businesses through our on-site and virtual technical assistance just last year. Moving, yes. We have several outreach channels. For example, the newsletter has over 9,000 subscribers. We share news and examples through our website blog, and we're actually about to roll out a series of blog posts over the next few months, starting with one this afternoon. We are grateful to have many towns and organizations help refer businesses and institutions to our website. And since we first launched a version of our website, we have received more than 1 million visits. Additionally, over the past 10 years, Recycling Works has provided over 16,000 instances of assistance overall, which I think is really great. One other item I'd like to point out on this slide is Instagram, which I'm very excited about. So yes, next slide, please. I am really excited to announce that today that Recycling Works is officially on Instagram. Now, I am supposed to ask everyone here to follow us at Recycling Works MA. That's Recycling Works MA on Instagram. My social media team has asked me to promote it here today, and I ask you to follow us. You would really help me out if you did. This edition is a great visual way to communicate with our customers and generate interest in the program. Next, please. Across our work areas, we're striving to break down barriers, including those related to language preferences or limited English proficiency, reaching minority-owned businesses, and investing in businesses that are located in or serve environmental justice communities. We've started to build relationships with groups that serve and support minority or immigrant-owned businesses. That is continuing this fiscal year, as we just recently tabled at the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts Mass Black Expo this past week ago Saturday. We're continuing Friday and Saturday. We're continually listening and learning in this area, and I'd ask that if any of you are familiar with a group or organization that can include our information in their newsletter or invite us to deliver a presentation on a topic of interest, please let us know. Additionally, I'm interested in listening to these organizations and learning from them what we can do to help. Next slide. We continue to translate our marketing and technical materials, such as training documents and waste container signage. It's part of our philosophy to meet people where they are. And as you can see here, a number of resources have been created or translated. And next slide. A few highlights from businesses and institutions that we've worked with and showcased on our website are shown here. May Restaurant in Boston, the Bombeck Center for Arts and Equity in Northampton, which is actually in the Florence section of Northampton. Being a resident, I need to make that clarification, and also MIT. And thank you. We recently published a new full case study featuring the food manufacturer Gorton Seafood. They have a streamlined recycling collection program and strive to reduce food waste through reduction and repurposing. It's a really great story and definitely worth a read. It can be found on our website. We recently held a practical skills workshop for commercial compost site operators with an emphasis on composting food materials that was focused on ASPs, aerated static piles. The workshop was held in person at Black Earth Compost in Groton. And this year we added an exciting component, which was a virtual educational session a few weeks prior to the event. It was about a 2-hour learning session. That meant attendees had a chance to learn about the topic before seeing it in action on site. And as John mentioned earlier, we assist compost site operators, about 8 in the last fiscal year. This past spring saw our first in-person Recycling Works forum since before the pandemic. It was held at UMass Dartmouth, and we were honored to have DEP Commissioner Papel attend and speak. In addition to being in person, we did offer a virtual option. A hybrid event is a more equitable model, not just to increase attendance for those who could not drive across the state, but more importantly, to offer an option for those whose accessibility needs meant being in person would have been difficult or impossible. As you can see, we had an excellent lineup of speakers. It was a really great event. Next. Most of the information presented here today and more is in the Recycling Works FY24 annual report and is on our website for your viewing pleasure. Looking ahead, we have a few priorities for this year. We will continue to focus on EJ communities. We are planning visits with an in-person translator in case community members would prefer to communicate in their first language. Also this year, we are highly focused on food waste reduction and diversion. And finally, another significant initiative is our rollout of the reusable food serviceware BMP, which brings me to the next section of our presentation. While our shorthand for this is the reusables BMP, I like to think of it as guidance based on best practices for integrating reusables into your food operation. We plan to unveil it at our presentation at the MHOA conference next week, actually 1 week from today on November 14th. It will be available on our website for distribution on that day as well. The goal of the document is to reduce single-use foodware by helping businesses and institutions switch to reusables. The guidance document has been in development for over a year and has truly been a collaborative effort. We held 3 stakeholder meetings and several one-on-one meetings. I'd like to thank everyone involved in the process. Your input, knowledge, and effort has made this possible. And a special thank you for some folks at the DEP, John Fisher, Claudine Elian, as well as Kathy Mirza, and the whole Reduce Reuse group. The document addresses 3 important areas as seen in the green box here. Whether the establishment provides the containers for takeout, a consumer provides containers for beverages, or consumers provide containers in a retail setting. And as I mentioned earlier, the document will be available after our November 14th presentation at the MHOA conference. Next up is our final part of the presentation, all about the green team. So I'll hand things over to our green team guru, Sonia Williams, to take us through those slides. Sonia.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sonia Williams. I'm a program consultant here at CET and help facilitate the Green Team program. The way I'm presenting slides showing my screen, I can now no longer see my speaker notes, so I blame Sean if I miss anything, just to make that clear. So the Green Team supports K through 12 schools in Massachusetts to reduce and divert waste from the schools. We do pollution prevention, idling reduction. We have idling reduction materials, signage, our recycling and composting equipment, technical assistance, really meeting schools where they are for what they need. We've expanded. Traditionally, we've had mostly teachers, classroom teachers as green team leaders, and the past 2 years, we've had a big push to incorporate more facilities directors, recycling coordinators for cities and towns, parent-teacher organizations, things like that, to make sure that those who can have the greatest impact on schools are getting what they need to reduce waste at their schools. Here's Benny. We all love him. Here's our website full of wonderful materials, years and years of case studies and resources and lesson plans for green team leaders to pull from and take a look at it and how it is now, because we have totally revamped it to now look like this. Oh, breath of fresh air. A nice cleaner layout, mobile friendly, easier to find resources. Benny is still there, don't worry. Our mascot is still featured on the website, so he's not going anywhere. But the website, the registration, everything is mobile friendly, easier to navigate. All the resources were transferred over, so nothing is missing. We'll just continue to add things, and this will save green team leaders time as they find the resources they need faster, find the applications they need faster, and get everyone what they need.
Hey, Sonia, as we all know, there's a lot of controversy sometimes when you change mascots. So I'm glad the decision was made to keep Benny in the fold.
Yeah.
I just want to say too, if it would make it easier for you, I do have the presentation working on my machine if you want me to share it.
Thank you. I was giving you a hard time. I think it's okay. I'll get through
Okay.
them.
Got it.
And Sonia, I've also messaged you some notes too,
Oh, thank you.
if it's helpful.
All right. Well,
Team effort.
I'm gonna get what you get, folks. Here we go. I'm gonna keep going through. So our web design is aesthetically pleasing. You know, there's nothing wrong with the old one, just a different, more updated look with how we have it now. Um, we've integrated the sign-up forms to connect with Salesforce. So a process that used to go a form to an email that went to my inbox that I reviewed and incorporated in one of our databases now is an instant link formatted on our Salesforce CRM platform. So I'm able to email teachers directly right from there and have a log, really efficient log of everything we do and how we support teachers. So a lot of administrative time is, and we now spend a fraction of the time with those administrative tasks. So we're able to spend that much more time with technical assistance and supporting the schools with what they need. Again, I can't say enough how happy I am about how pretty this looks. When you're in it every day, you know, you really appreciate when it's smoother, more streamlined. So now schools can go on the website and type in their name. It autofills. We're making it easy as possible to just get started with the program, get over the administrative hurdles and get people what they need. So an overview of last year's support for schools, we had 359 participating green teams. We're back to pre-pandemic numbers, which is really exciting. Over 55,000 participating students, 320 schools, 40% of which are located in environmental justice communities. 38 schools received recycling and composting equipment. Shout out to Claudine and Rob Taccio for their help at those distribution days. It's a team effort and some of the best days of the year at work. So I love those days and appreciate all the help. And 11 schools received idling reduction materials. One school administrator shared, "Your recycling bin program is really perfect timing for us. It felt like a gift to our school." I think so frequently, as someone who was an educator for 10 years, I taught second grade, and a lot of things feel like, oh, if I make this happen, there's this long to-do list, who's sort of in my corner fighting for me and what I can do. And that's really my goal with this program, is to make life easier for people who are trying to make positive changes at their schools. So loved that quote, and that's one of many with a similar sentiment that we've been receiving. Several outreach efforts. Our monthly newsletter has over 5,000 subscribers. I'm able to look at the data each month, see who's clicking which link, follow up with someone if I see they're clicking the link and interested and have sent me an email or different things going on. I can look at what's going on at the school and then send a follow-up email with technical assistance right off the bat to connect the dots and get things moving. We're reaching out to principals and superintendents, facility directors. We're part of the MassDEP Green Sword program, very tied to Safe Routes to School, especially with our idling reduction materials, and several conferences that are another major highlight of our year, and shaking hands with educators and program leaders and getting them what they need. We have a new case study at Lawrence Family Development Charter School. Please feel welcome to click the link and read all about it. They've diverted over 23 tons of waste from the waste stream through, they diverted to anaerobic digestion. And then we were able to do a site visit and provide technical assistance for different best practices, like stacking the cardboard trays in one separate stack instead of all sort of piled on each other in the bag, and that reduced their volume and reduced the number of pickups they needed, which saved them thousands of dollars a year. Our schools are receiving prizes and recognition. Here's some proud students in Hingham at Foster Elementary School holding up their certificates. Grand prize winners received gift cards this year to empower them to purchase whatever material would support their program. So our grand prize winner, HEC Academy in Northampton, they were able to purchase additional kitchen equipment to support their farm to table programming. as one example. So here's the press release that you can click through and look on your own for more detail. We also have our annual report ready to go. Looking ahead at fiscal FY25, we have priorities to continue with technical assistance. We have that much more capacity to support schools now that we've been able to streamline a lot of these administrative tasks with our new website and things like that. We're making it easier. That mobile-friendly registration is huge. The number of times I've been at conferences, people are really excited. Yeah, let me do it. Okay, pull it up, and it wasn't loading and wasn't doing all these things. So now I know that that example alone would have a really high impact on the year ahead. Last year, at the end of the year, we had 359 green teams. This year, November 7th, we already have over 370. So the plan's working, and we're getting we're getting schools the support they need, and it's really exciting. Also a focus on a district-wide registration. We have facilities directors and people at recycling coordinators at the municipal level who know what their schools need. They're the ones boots on the ground in their communities, and we're able to coordinate equipment with them to then distribute with their teachers to make sure that it's the most efficient use of our equipment. Very strong response. This year already, we've distributed all of the equipment we had in inventory, and we had a lot of very happy green teams at our October 29th distribution day. We also have a major focus on inclusivity and access to resources across the Commonwealth. Again, coordinating with facility directors for pickups and things like that. So it's not all on the teacher with, the motivation, but maybe not the resources to come and get the materials. Hand it back to Steve.
Thank you, Sonia. And I can't say enough about the amazing job Sonia and the green team is doing. And wish we had a couple more minutes to talk about how amazing the new website and registration forms have been. It's evident in the fact that we've already surpassed last year's registrations. But this is our contact information here for the Green Team and Recycling Works hotlines. Please feel to reach out. And we're also open to hearing any questions that you might have here. Thank you very much. Sean, how did we do?
Well, for one, you saved me from bumbling with my technology, so that's a passing mark there. We're getting kudos here in the comments. I just want to, kind of in the brief time that we have left here, just kind of say the involvement of Recycling Works touches more than just the things that you mentioned in your presentation. I mean, John, there was questions about the food waste ban and getting achieving compliance with generators, right? For John in his previous presentation. I mean, obviously, a lot of our success in that arena is thanks to the technical assistance that Recycling Works has been able to provide. I went on my Instagram during the meeting, per Stephen's instruction. I have added Recycling Works MA on Instagram. So just another shout out for that. And just a question for Sonia too. Is there, and not to put you on the spot, but is there data saying how many people access it mobily versus how many do it on the web? I assume that, any insight you got into that might have driven, a more mobile friendly approach. It just makes sense in 2024.
Yeah, I know we can look at all the website analytics. I will need help from one of my team members to parse out that data, but that would be great to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that it's there. I mean, Isn't it the worst feeling in the world to try to do something on your phone and it's like, man, this website's from 1990. I realized there were very few websites in 1990, but that's my point. So thank you for your presentation, folks. Again, just a load of kudos in the comments here. I don't know if some of my colleagues, if there are any pressing questions at the conclusion of this meeting, I'm willing to stay on for an extra 5 or 10 here to talk about it or take any emails offline. It's just first name dot last name at mass.gov. But otherwise, I want to thank our presenters, Leah, Mike, John, Claudine, John again, Stephen, Sonia. a lot of information that we put out there today. I hope you all enjoyed getting to hear about it, that you take some time to absorb it, and if there is any follow-up, that you feel free to reach out. But here at 12:01, I think we can say, other than any other questions that might persist, we can conclude today's Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.